I'm Joe Lample. When I created Growing a Greener World, I had one goal: to tell stories of everyday people, innovators, entrepreneurs, forward-thinking leaders who are all, in ways both big and small, dedicated to organic gardening and farming, lightening our footprint, conserving vital resources, protecting natural habitats, making a tangible difference for us all. They're real, they're passionate, they're all around us. They're the game changers who are literally growing a greener world and inspiring the rest of us to do the same. Growing a greener world, it's more than a movement, it's our mission. Whenever I'm diagnosing a plant problem, I'm always curious to know if they've done a soil test. And you know what? The answer is almost always no. And that's a shame, because so many plant problems could be rectified if they just knew the condition of their soil. And it's an easy fix. You just need to analyze it with a soil test. In order for plants to thrive, they need a few basic elements, including organic matter and certain levels of nutrients. Many of these are found naturally in the native soil. However, there are major and minor, as well as micronutrients, that are all used by plants in various quantities. The soil analysis will tell you the level of these nutrients found or lacking in your soil. In addition to the organic matter and the nutrient levels, you also need to understand the pH level. Now, you could have all the nutrients you need here, but if the pH is out of the range for the preferred range of the plant you're growing, those nutrients still won't be available. They'll be chemically locked up or bound. So if you know what the pH level in the soil is relative to what the plant needs, you can make those adjustments, and that's where the soil test will help. pH is measured in a range between 0 and 14. A pH reading under 7.0 indicates soil that is acidic, while a reading above 7.0 indicates a soil that's alkaline. The further away from 7.0 you get in either direction, the more acidic or alkaline the soil is. 7.0 is neutral, and most plants prefer growing in soil that's neutral too, since they're able to take up nutrients more easily this way. If your soil is outside of the preferred range for the plants or lawn you want to grow, a soil test will help you bring it back to that level, closer to where it needs to be. So what's involved in having your soil tested? Well, first, take comfort in knowing it's probably the easiest test that you're ever going to take. All you need is a clean trowel or something to extract the samples with, and something to put it in, like a bucket. Now, you want this to be clean because you don't want contaminated samples going to the lab. But there's one more thing you need. Once you collect all those samples and mix them together, you need a box or a bag to put them in, and this one's provided by my county extension service just for that purpose. And you know what the best part is? Just in case I forget, all the instructions are printed right on the surface. Not bad. The first step is to know what is or will be growing in the area that you want to have tested. For example, a vegetable garden. You want to take all your samples from just the vegetable growing area. And if it's a lawn you want to have tested, take all your samples from just that area. And perennials, same thing applies. The point is that edibles have a preferred growing environment, lawns may have a different preference, and perennials a third preference. So if you want the best analysis for the area that you're having tested, you don't want to blend the samples from one area to the next. Around the plot in question, randomly collect a dozen or more soil cores or slices to a depth of about 4 to 6 inches. Crush and thoroughly mix the cores in a clean plastic bag or bucket while making sure to discard the rocks, sticks, and debris if possible. Complete the information on the box using a permanent marker. Insert the blended soil samples up to the fill line and secure the box. And one more thing. Because this whole process can take quite a while, you don't want to wait until the last second to get your results back. Especially if you're going to make some amendments to your soil, you need time for all of that to happen. Now, for me, I typically send my samples in about 4 months before the growing season, and it's always worked out just fine. Finally, if there's any paperwork that needs to be filled out, be sure to do that and include it with your samples. A nominal fee might be required as well, so now would be a good time to enclose that too. Pack everything up, send it off, and in a few weeks, you'll have a detailed analysis that will provide everything you need to know to improve your soil to optimal conditions for whatever you're trying to grow. Now, about that report. There are a number of ways to have your soil tested. You could go to a garden center and buy a basic DIY kit like this, or you could go online and order a report, or even pick up your favorite catalog and probably find it right there. But for the most accurate and comprehensive report, well, that comes from a private lab or through the county extension service. And for the money, there's no better investment. But to find out what really happens once the soil hits the lab, well, for that, you just need to see for yourself. We're here at the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and this is the place where all the soil samples come from all over the state, and it can get pretty crazy around here during peak times because they can get thousands of samples a day, which is a testament to the importance of having healthy soil, not only for those that depend on it for their livelihood, but for home gardeners and weekend warriors alike. Now today, Dr. David Hardy is Chief of Soil Testing. He's going to give us a tour of this place from the time that the soil sample hits the dock all the way through to the finished report.
Well, Joe, this is where it all begins. This is our soil receiving room, and during the non-busy time of the year, samples will be pulled directly into this room the same day they're received. But during our busy time of the year, which usually begins in September, we start storing samples because we receive so many on a given day, up to over 10,000 a day. It's hard to believe.
10,000 a day.
10,000 or more.
So that's got to really pile up, even in a building like this where you're putting everything.
It does. We have the capacity to analyze around 3,600 a day. So when you're getting in 10,000, they build up in mountains really fast. So we have 90 yellow laundry carts that we store samples in and place them down the hall and in bulk storage.
Yeah.
Once we have the samples trayed up and in carts, we roll them into the dryer for drying overnight. The temperature is around 130 Fahrenheit with a lot of airflow. We just need to get the samples dry, air dry, so we can grind them the next day and process them. After the samples dry, we then grind it, which prepares the sample for the analysis. This separates out the fractions that's not soil and then really mixes the soil particles well for the scooping process that occurs in the lab. And Joe, this is the soil takeout room. So we have the sample that's been ground, and they're scooping the soil 3 different times for the laboratory analysis.
And that's just like a thimble full, and all you need is 3 of those for everything that you test?
That's right. We asked for the box to come in full, but the grinding process takes away quite a bit of soil, but we only need 3 small amounts of soil for the lab test.
It's not that much.
Not at all. So Joe, there's 3 tests we run in the lab. First being organic matter, which is very important to people to see what the organic matter content is in their soil. Typically it runs anywhere from being non-existent to maybe around 2 to 3%. When you look at organic matter, just like soil has color, it gives the soil the dark color. And we have a test that actually looks at the color of a solution to kind of give a measurement for organic matter. We also test the soil for phosphorus, potassium, calcium, the essential nutrients that plants need. That comes off an ICP, which is really a light determination kind of test. We give recommendations based upon what the nutrient levels are in the soil for the plants to grow. The last test we do was soil pH. Soil acidity is critical for plants to grow, and that's how we get our lime recommendations that actually will raise the pH, because pH, regulates really the availability of nutrients in the soil, so that is utmost important to the grower. And Joe, from all that lab work, we've got the final result, the soil test report, from which we can find the results and the recommendations. We're looking at, in this case, 0 lime for the lime recommendation,
That's the
And
pH part.
That's the pH part. And then we can look over here and look at the phosphorus and potassium and look at the fertilizer recommended based upon the lab results.
And the nutrients that were in the soil sample.
That's right, and what the plant needs.
And then the organic matter, where's that? That's really important.
Right over here in the results, we see 0.22% humic matter, which is about a 0.5% organic matter.
Right, that's very important, and that just goes back to what you said earlier about how low that number is. Now, this is a good report. The only thing that would be better if this were my report, I sent my samples in weeks ago. Do you think we can?
Well, let's take a look and search for it.
Yeah, good. One of the best parts about this report, it tells you the nutrients you need to add to bring your soil into peak conditions for those plants or crops you're trying to grow. But I use it for the opposite, what not to add, because there are a lot of nutrients that don't automatically leach through the soil, so you just don't need to reach for those fertilizers when they're not necessary. And I think that's a pretty good tip in my green gardening book. Wow, that is nice. A great way to boost the nutrient levels and bump up the organic matter naturally at the same time is with compost. It's the single best amendment you can add for building healthy soil, bar none. We've covered the topic in a previous episode on how to make compost at home and how it's done commercially. And you can find that on our website at growingagreenerworld.com. But really, can you ever make enough of the good stuff to satisfy all your gardening and landscaping needs? Usually not. So that's when it's helpful to know where you can go when you need to get compost in larger quantities. But as with all things, it's buyer beware. Frank Franciosi is president of the U.S. Composting Council and manager of Novozymes Nature's Green Relief Composting Facility just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. Frank spent the majority of his career talking about one of my favorite subjects, compost. Frank, I really like the idea of knowing that we can buy compost in bulk, but I need to know that it's made with the same integrity that I would make it with at home. So the question is, what do we need to know when we're buying it in bulk? And secondly, where do we find the good stuff?
Well, Joe, we feel that we can make it better than you can at home, and here's the reason why. We produce our compost based on the U.S. Compost Council's Seal of Testing Assurance Program. This program's been around for about 10 years now, and it assures that the end product has been produced by a permitted facility and that that product has been tested for safety for the consumer and will also grow plant material.
Okay, that's good to know. So I want to find a place like that. How do I do it?
Real simple. Go to the U.S. Compost Council's website, compostingcouncil.org, look for Find Compost, click on that button, put in your zip code, it'll pop up the nearest producer that's closest to you.
Simple enough. So I find that place, I show up. Am I to assume that all the compost there is certified and safe?
If it's being produced by one that has the Seal of Testing Assurance, yes, but I would also ask for the test data sheet. The technical test data sheet will give you all the information you need, will show you the parameters that were tested. The second page will show you the ingredients of that compost, where it came from, and also how to use that particular compost.
Now, what about those herbicides that we hear about today that can survive the composting process?
Well, those herbicides are called biopersistent herbicides, and they really should not be on the market. But what we do in the composting industry is we actually are doing tests. Part of the Seal of Testing Assurance program is a maturity test. That's a bioassay test where you actually take cucumber seeds and germinate them and also count how many actually germinated and if those seeds are healthy in vigor. If you see twisting or you see seeds that are not germinating, then there's a problem with that compost. It's probably not mature enough, or it could be an indication that there's possibly herbicide if you see a twisting effect. We can go one step further, and you can ask your STA lab to also test for red clover. We also do that. So that's kind of our second defense. If you do show a positive, that compost should be identified, separated, and actually landfilled.
Got it. Well, to me, this is one of the prettiest sights on Earth because it's a finished mountain of compost. And if I had it my way, it would all be coming home to my garden. But even if you're a compost lover like me, you don't want to plant into 100% of this because you need the right balance between organic matter and minerals. Now, the U.S. Composting Council has determined that number to be 5% organic matter. In fact, they have a saying, strive for 5. Now, 5% may not sound very high to you until you understand that the average organic matter across America is less than 1%. Now, get a soil test to find out what your number is, and we've got a way to show you how to get that number up to 5%. Don't step on the soil too much. Okay, so if we're striving for 5% organic matter, how do we know when we get there? Well, a soil test is a good place to begin, and we've already learned that most native soils have little to no organic matter before they're amended. So we want to get to 5%. Let's see how to do it, and let's use this bed as an example. Now this is compost, and we certainly want that all around our roots, right? Well, let's use an example of 10 inches. Now if we can incorporate 1 inch of compost along the surface, that's 1/10 or 10%, and we only need 5%. So that would be a ½ an inch. And yes, a little bit goes a long way, and you know what else? Compost isn't even 100% organic either. But this isn't an exact science, but it does get us a lot closer, and that's good enough for this. So what if you want to cover a larger area, like a lawn for example? Well, all you need to do is calculate the square footage and how deep you want the coverage, and let an online calculator do the rest. And it's not just for compost, you can use mulch or sand or anything else you want to cover for that matter. And we have the link for that on our website under the show notes for this episode. The address is the same as our name, it's growingagreenerworld.com. At the heart of any organic lawn care program is the addition of compost, spread on a consistent, even basis. And compared to synthetic fertilizer, compost does so much. That organic matter helps improve the soil structure and retain valuable soil moisture, and it can even cut down on certain lawn diseases. And yet there are two main challenges with trying to spread enough compost over your entire yard without it taking up your entire weekend. Now the first is coming up with enough compost, especially when we make it from home, because that only goes so far. And second, even when we have enough compost, how do you spread it efficiently? Well, the first method is to collect as much as you need and methodically go around your lawn, spreading it evenly with a shovel or some other tool. That works fine if you have a small yard, but for one of any size, this can be tedious. Okay, so broadcast spreaders like this were designed for just this reason, sort of. They work great for spreading out a lot of material quickly and efficiently to a wide area, but they don't work so well if that material is either heavy or clumpy, or certainly when it's wet. So if you want to use your spreader to spread your compost, well, that's going to require a few extra steps. And the first thing is, your compost needs to be completely dry, so having a cover over the top of the finished bin like mine helps out with that a lot. So next, once we have dry ingredients, we need it to be fine enough to sift down through the bottom of the hopper. Even the most finished compost is going to have irregular shapes and sizes, so we have to even this out and basically sift it down to get the compost fine enough to pass through the spreader. How do you do that? With a sifter, of course. I have two here, one to sift out the larger pieces, and then a final one that really gets my compost down to a fine, even consistency. The finished product is great, but the process in getting here is pretty labor intensive. Fortunately, we can have the best of both worlds. All the compost we need spread across our lawns, delivered and applied in just a matter of minutes. Companies in this business will load certified compost into a pneumatic blower truck like this one. And if you want to be extra efficient with your time, the system is designed to feed both compost and grass seed at the same time. Once on site, the operator works his way evenly across your entire lawn with a discharge hose. The standard application is to deliver about a ½ inch of compost to the turf area, and your lawn will be off to a great start for this season. When you put the right plant in the right place and you focus on creating healthy, nutrient-rich soil with lots of organic matter, and namely compost, you give that soil everything it needs to take care of the plants. And a great place to start the process is with a soil test. We have a lot of information on our website, including a link on how to find the County Extension Service closest to you to get that soil test, and you can also see an episode on how to make your own compost at home. The address is the same as our name, growingagreenerworld.com, and it will be all there under the show notes for this episode. I'm Joe Lample. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you back here next time for more Growing a Greener World.